The banquet hall of Riverside Grand Hotel shimmered with golden lights and the hum of nostalgic conversations as former classmates gathered for what they believed would be an ordinary reunion. The event committee had hired a keynote speaker, someone whose TED Talk about overcoming adversity had reached over 8 million views, someone whose voice inspired change across continents. They knew his name was Daniel Cross. What they didn't know was that Daniel Cross was once Daniel Carter, the boy they tormented daily, the boy whose stutter made him a target, the boy they nicknamed the Mute, because words seemed like his greatest enemy. As the lights dimmed and the microphone was adjusted on stage, Daniel stood backstage, his heart steady, but his memories flooding back. He didn't return for revenge or validation. He returned because facing your past is the only way to truly be free from it. And as his name was announced to thunderous applause, he stepped into the light, ready to show them that the voice they once silenced had become one the world now listened to.
Rain drummed softly against the tall windows of the Riverside Grand Hotel as evening descended, casting long shadows across the reunion hall where 200 former students of Oakmont High School had gathered. The air buzzed with laughter. Champagne glasses clinked and old friends embraced, reliving memories from a decade ago. But none of them could have imagined that the man standing quietly backstage, adjusting his tie and taking slow, deliberate breaths, was someone they once made cry every single day. His name back then was Daniel Carter. He was the boy with the stutter, the one who took minutes to answer a simple question, whose face would flush red as classmates mocked his struggle to form words. They called him the Mute, broken record, and sometimes simply ignored him as if he didn't exist. His school years weren't filled with friendships or milestones. They were filled with isolation, shame, and the suffocating belief that he would never be enough. But Daniel had spent the last 10 years proving that belief wrong, not to them, but to himself. Tonight, he stood as Daniel Cross, a name he adopted professionally, a motivational speaker whose viral TED Talk, When Silence Becomes Strength, had inspired millions around the world. The reunion committee had no idea who he really was. They simply hired the most popular speaker they could afford, never connecting the polished professional to the broken boy they left behind. If you believe in the power of transformation, kindness, and second chances, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Corner, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us reach hearts across the globe.
Daniel's childhood was a war zone disguised as a classroom. Every morning, walking through those school doors felt like stepping into battle. His stutter wasn't mild, it was severe, paralyzing. Words would get stuck in his throat like stones he couldn't swallow. Simple introductions became marathons of humiliation. During roll call, while other students answered "here" in half a second, Daniel would sit frozen, his mouth moving but no sound emerging, until finally, after what felt like eternity, the word would break free, fractured and trembling. The laughter that followed was automatic, casual cruelty served with smiles. His classmates, especially a group led by Connor Mitchell and Ashley Brooks, made Daniel stutter their daily entertainment. They would mock him in the cafeteria, record him struggling during presentations, and post clips online with captions like "buffering in real life" and "when your brain lags." Teachers tried to help, but their pity often made things worse. Daniel didn't want sympathy. He wanted to disappear. His only refuge was his journal, where he wrote the words that wouldn't come out of his mouth. He filled notebooks with thoughts, dreams, and the stories he wished he could tell. His mother, a single parent working 2 jobs, didn't know the depth of his pain. He hid it well, perfecting the art of silent suffering. But there was one person who saw him, truly saw him. Mr. Raymond Hayes, the school's elderly librarian, noticed Daniel spending hours alone among the shelves. One day, he handed Daniel a book titled The Power of Imperfection and said, "Son, some of the world's greatest voices belong to people who struggled to speak. Your words matter. Don't let fear steal them. That moment planted a seed Daniel didn't know he needed.
After graduation, Daniel didn't go to college right away. He couldn't afford it, and emotionally, he wasn't ready. Instead, he worked at a warehouse, loading boxes in silence, which felt safer than human interaction. But Mr. Hayes's words echoed constantly. Late at night, after shifts, Daniel would sit in his small apartment and write. He wrote about pain, resilience, fear, and hope. He started a blog called Finding My Voice, where he shared his journey with stuttering, the bullying he endured, and the mental battles that came with it. At first, only a few people read it, but slowly his raw honesty resonated. Comments poured in from people around the world who felt seen through his words. One reader suggested he try speech therapy. Daniel was terrified, but willing. He found a therapist named Dr. Linda Rosario, who specialized in stuttering. She didn't promise a cure. She promised understanding. For 2 years, Daniel worked relentlessly on breathing techniques, desensitization exercises, and gradual exposure to speaking situations. He practiced reading aloud to empty rooms, then to small groups, then at community centers. Progress was slow and painful. There were nights he cried, convinced he'd never overcome it. But Dr. Rosario reminded him, fluency isn't the goal. Communication is. And you, Daniel, have something powerful to say. Eventually, Daniel was invited to speak at a local nonprofit event about overcoming adversity. His hands shook, his voice wavered, but he spoke. And when he finished, the room stood and applauded, not because his speech was perfect, but because his courage was undeniable. That moment changed everything. Opportunities followed. Daniel became a sought-after speaker, sharing his story at schools, conferences, and eventually on a TED stage, where his talk went viral, reaching over 8 million views globally. He changed his last name to Cross, symbolizing the bridge he built from pain to purpose. Nobody from his past knew. After graduation, Daniel didn't go to college right away. He couldn't afford it, and emotionally, he wasn't ready. Instead, he worked at a warehouse, loading boxes in silence, which felt safer than human interaction. But Mr. Hayes's words echoed constantly. Late at night, after shifts, Daniel would sit in his small apartment and write. He wrote about pain, resilience, fear, and hope. He started a blog called Finding My Voice, where he shared his journey with stuttering, the bullying he endured, and the mental battles that came with it. At first, only a few people read it, but slowly his raw honesty resonated. Comments poured in from people around the world who felt seen through his words. One reader suggested he try speech therapy. Daniel was terrified, but willing. He found a therapist named Dr. Linda Rosario, who specialized in stuttering. She didn't promise a cure. She promised understanding. For 2 years, Daniel worked relentlessly on breathing techniques, desensitization exercises, and gradual exposure to speaking situations. He practiced reading aloud to empty rooms, then to small groups, then at community centers. Progress was slow and painful. There were nights he cried, convinced he'd never overcome it. But Dr. Rosario reminded him, fluency isn't the goal. Communication is. And you, Daniel, have something powerful to say. Eventually, Daniel was invited to speak at a local nonprofit event about overcoming adversity. His hands shook, his voice wavered, but he spoke. And when he finished, the room stood and applauded, not because his speech was perfect, but because his courage was undeniable. That moment changed everything. Opportunities followed. Daniel became a sought-after speaker, sharing his story at schools, conferences, and eventually on a TED stage, where his talk went viral, reaching over 8 million views globally. He changed his last name to Cross, symbolizing the bridge he built from pain to purpose. Nobody from his past knew.
The reunion organizers, led ironically by Connor Mitchell, now a real estate agent, and Ashley Brooks, a marketing consultant, had wanted to make their 10-year reunion unforgettable. They hired Daniel Cross after watching his TED Talk, completely unaware of who he truly was. As Daniel stood backstage, listening to Connor introduce him as an incredible speaker who's inspired millions, a strange calm washed over him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He felt something deeper. Peace. Because the boy they broke had rebuilt himself into someone even they admired. The lights dimmed. His name was called. Daniel Cross walked onto the stage, bathed in spotlight. The applause was deafening, enthusiastic, but as he reached the microphone and his face became visible, something shifted. A few people in the crowd squinted, tilted their heads. Recognition flickered across some faces. Connor, seated at the front table, froze mid-clap, his smile fading. Ashley's eyes widened in disbelief. Whispers began to ripple through the audience like a wave. "Wait, is that? No way, that's Daniel Carter. The kid who stuttered?" Daniel let the silence stretch for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the room. Then he smiled, not with malice, but with grace. He opened his mouth to speak, and his voice, steady and clear, filled the room. "Good evening. My name is Daniel Cross, but some of you knew me as Daniel Carter." The room went completely silent. You could hear hearts pounding. "I know what you're thinking," Daniel continued, his tone gentle but firm. "You're remembering the boy who couldn't speak without struggling. The boy you called names. The boy you laughed at. And I want to tell you something important." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "That boy forgave you a long time ago." For the next 30 minutes, Daniel delivered the most powerful speech of his life. He didn't shame anyone. He didn't point fingers. Instead, he told his story with raw vulnerability, explaining how cruelty nearly destroyed him, but ultimately became the catalyst for his transformation. He spoke about the nights he felt worthless, the days he wanted to give up, and the people like Mr. Hayes and Dr. Rosario who reminded him he mattered. He explained that his stutter, once his greatest shame, became his greatest teacher, showing him that strength isn't about perfection, it's about perseverance. He shared how every word he struggled to say taught him patience, empathy, and the importance of truly listening. As he spoke, tears streamed down faces in the audience. Connor sat with his head in his hands, visibly shaken. Ashley wiped her eyes repeatedly, her expression filled with regret. Others who had once laughed now listened in stunned silence, confronted with the weight of their past actions. Daniel concluded, "I didn't come here tonight to make you feel guilty. I came to remind all of us, myself included, that we all have the power to change. The person you are at 18 doesn't have to be who you are at 28. I chose to let go of anger. I chose to rebuild. And I hope that wherever you are in your journey, you choose growth over bitterness, kindness over cruelty, and courage over fear." The room erupted into applause, but this time it wasn't polite. It was emotional, cathartic. People stood, some sobbing openly. After the speech, Connor approached Daniel, his voice breaking. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I was a terrible person to you." Daniel extended his hand. "We were kids, Connor. I forgive you." Ashley hugged him, whispering apologies through tears. Others followed, seeking forgiveness, sharing their own struggles, thanking him for his courage. As the evening ended and Daniel stepped outside into the cool night air, he looked up at the stars and felt something profound: freedom. He had faced his past not with revenge, but with grace. And in doing so, he freed not just himself, but everyone in that room from the ghosts of who they used to be. If this story touched your heart, please comment, "I believe in second chances." Your words matter more than you know. Before Daniel left, he placed a handwritten note on the memorial table where old yearbooks were displayed. It read, "To the boy I was, you survived. To the man I became, you thrived. To anyone struggling tonight, your voice matters. Never stop speaking." The helicopter in the original story was a symbol, but Daniel's arrival was quieter, more powerful. Because the greatest transformation isn't announced with noise. It's proven with presence, grace, and the undeniable truth that healing is the ultimate victory.